Every year it seems that there's a news story of a police officer having to shoot his or her dog because the dog attacked them, or there's a video of a dog attacking his handler while they were training, or even during an actual operation. And I'm here to tell you that this problem is actually a lot more common than you might otherwise believe it is. Thankfully, not the dog getting shot part, but the working canine biting, the officer. That's a fairly prevalent issue, and it's almost an accepted hazard of the job. And like many things, it's one of those issues that's actually not too difficult to avoid if you know what you're doing. But like many things, there's a number of reasons why it happens. And it doesn't just happen to police officers. It also happens on the sport dog side of things, whether we're talking Schutzhund IGP, PSA, ring sport. This stuff does happen on the bite sport side of the equation as well. And the reason why is because we're dealing with the same dogs. Okay, it's, as much as people want to pretend that sport dogs and police dogs are somehow vastly different, they're the exact same dogs, the exact same lines. For the most part, in many cases, working police canine, their siblings are in sport, or their parents are involved in sport. So these are the exact same dogs, and of course you're going to see problems on both sides of the equation. Now, I think it's more prevalent on the police dog side of things, and I'm going to talk about why that is, and I'm also going to talk about, like I said, the factors that contribute to this happening. It's also, of course, it's more famous when a police dog bites his or her handler. It's something that's going to be more publicized because there's a lot of public scrutiny directed towards police departments in this day and age, especially if it's something as salacious as the police officer ending up shooting their canine. So let's talk about why police dogs bite the handler. So number one, there's a number of factors that probably contribute to the prevalency of this issue. Number one, we are dealing with green dogs. So a lot of departments do not acquire their working canine as puppies. They buy the dogs between a year and 2 years of age. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a relatively grown dog. This is a large animal that has a lot of intensity and a lot of drive, because that's the way they're bred, and that's the quality that they need to have in order to perform their function as a police dog. Then you're marrying that to generally the dog not being able to control themselves when they're in a state of high arousal, very little to no impulse control. And the reason why, again, it's a green dog. In many cases, they don't have all that much training, if any training, on them before they go to the department. So, you've got this dog that's genetically gifted with tons of drive and intensity, and you marry that to a lack of impulse control because the dog's never been shown how to control his or her impulses. And then, on top of all of that, we're going to marry that young dog with no impulse control and tons of drive and intensity to a green handler. Because in many cases, I don't know if I would say most, but many cases, the handler that's getting the police dog is green. They don't have much experience, if any experience. This could be their first dog, even if it's their second or third dog. Anybody that's worked a fair few working dogs know that they're all different and they all have different proclivities. And if you're not prepared for the special mix of genetics and maybe learned behavior that is your dog, you might be in for a bit of a wild ride. So regardless of whether you were working, a particular type of dog on the street for 8 and 9 years previous to the new one. So this is you put all these things together, and you can see why handler aggression can be a fairly common issue that officers unfortunately have to deal with from time to time. Now, there's one other factor that I think bears mentioning. A lot of departments kind of follow a little bit of antiquated training systems from like the 70s and the 80s, right? Now, I definitely have noticed lately, especially around here, that there's been a push to modernize. Officers becoming more interested in the modern type of training systems brought forward by a lot of sport dog trainers, ironically. The training is improving, and I think the way the dogs are being handled is improving in some areas, but it's still a problem that's fairly prevalent, because you know, even with a better training system, you've still got all those factors that I described, and you know, mistakes are going to happen. Let's talk about the common scenarios under which these bites usually happen. So probably the most common is redirection. Okay, so you've got, you know, a young dog, high drive, high intensity, or maybe not so young, and they're directing all their arousal and intensity towards an object or a person, whether it's a ball or a bad guy, a suspect, a decoy. You know, the dog wants to get to something, and the only thing standing between the dog and that thing is you, right? Or you're holding the dog back and preventing him or her from getting to the thing. So all that arousal has got to go somewhere, especially if the dog doesn't have a good natural ability to cope with this behavior. And there's definitely dogs that are more genetically predisposed to redirecting on the handler. It's a pretty common issue that you see with Belgian Malinois, which is why I think a lot of departments try to avoid the breed. Not all of them, but you know, there's a fair few that only want to deal with German Shepherds because it is less of a common problem with German Shepherds, right? And basically the dog really wants to get to this thing, and you are between the dog and that thing. Now, usually what makes redirection worse is handlers, you know, are often frustrated with the dog. They're trying to get the dog under control, and they're putting pressure on the dog with a pinch collar or with an e-collar to try and make the dog listen, you know, sit, down, foos, foos. And they're putting all this pressure on the dog while the dog is in this high state of arousal that's directed towards something. And of course, this causes all that energy and arousal to go somewhere, and it's usually up the leash. So this is one of the most probably common circumstances under which a handler bite happens. And once it happens once, it becomes more likely to happen again and again and again. And you know, I've dealt with a fair few dogs that have learned this habit, and it's always fun to train it out of them. It is quite possible to do, and in many cases it's actually quite easy to do. But you know, it's something to definitely look out for. Now, the second, and probably less common, but still, you know, probably somewhat prevalent, again, on the sport and the police canine side of things, is dogs that carry some social aggression, dogs that carry some dominance, dogs that think very highly of themselves, dogs that, you know, aren't so cooperative, let's say. And, you know, and again, we've got all that intensity and all that arousal, and you're trying to tell, you know, Mr. King Kong what to do, but Mr. King Kong isn't ready to listen to you. He wants to keep doing King Kong things, and you know, you are standing in the way of that. So that's again a situation where you know, you can often see, you know, the dog become aggressive towards the handler, and it's something that if the dog is successful in doing it, right, whether it's because you were putting pressure on him or whether it's just him trying to put you in your place socially from a social perspective, if he is successful in that, you know, it's a working dog. They learn fast, and you really don't want him or her to learn that is a good way to turn off pressure, or that's a you know, a good solution to you know, a social interaction that the dog is not getting the better of. So both of these circumstances are probably the most common circumstances under which a dog will bite the handler, working canine. Let's talk about how to prevent these issues. So number one, pressure needs to be learned in a fair, clear, and concise manner. A lot of people view pressure as one-dimensional. So basically, I tell him what to do, he doesn't do it, I put pressure on him. That is not how you train a dog, a working dog. Not for me anyways. I mean, that's how some people do it. They kind of do everything as positive as they can, and then after they've done the positive, they start putting pressure over the positive and saying, hey, you've got to do all this stuff I taught you to do for food or for your ball. Now you're gonna do it, and if you don't do it, I'm gonna put pressure on you. And hey, that can definitely work if you're dealing with a certain kind of dog. But if you're dealing with one of the types of dogs that's a little bit more prone to redirection, or the type of dog that's maybe has some social aggression, that is not going to work out well for you. That'll probably cause the kind of issues that you're having. Now, there are some people, they don't even bother with the positive side of it. They just go pressure right away. Bang, bang, bang. Do what I tell you to do. Otherwise, I'm going to, you know, rip your head off with this prong collar. And it's like, okay, again, there are dogs that will put up with that. There are dogs that will go along with that. But there are many of these dogs that, listen, we breed them a certain way. We breed them to have a strength of character and a strength of belief and resilience in the face of adversity that, doesn't always lend itself to a dog that's super compliant with that type of handling. So that's why, again, you see a lot of handlers get bit. More antiquated kind of training. Now, don't get me wrong. Pressure is not the problem. It's the bad kind of pressure that's the problem. With this type of dog, I put pressure everywhere. I put pressure in the learning phase of the training. The dog learns how to react to small, incremental amounts of pressure. The dog learns how to turn that pressure off and how to get the reward that he or she desires. And I slowly increase the pressure. And I make the pressure part of the reward. I make the pressure part of the obligation. I make the pressure part of the motivation. I put pressure all throughout the training system in multiple contexts. And the dog then learns that pressure isn't inherently good or bad. It's just pressure. And this is how you're supposed to cope with that pressure, depending on the situation. So I'll give you an example. This dog you've been watching on the video, 4-year-old dog named Vasco, came to us 5 months ago, has chewed up 2 previous handlers, and these were not new handlers that he chewed up. These were handlers that have had some dogs in their past. He's a bit of a nasty dog, has some social aggression, a little bit of a resource guarder, and also likes to redirect when he gets a little bit too amped up, right? Tons of drive, tons of arousal, and a real kind of dog. This dog is a fantastic dog. He has a lot to give. This is the kind of dog, we don't need all the dogs in the breed to be like this, but we do need dogs like this. We need really strong, really serious dogs. It's important, I think, to the continued success of the blood in the breed. But dogs like this need a experienced hand. You cannot do stupid things with dogs like this. They aren't forgiving of that. So, for example, with this dog, you'll notice we let him blow off steam, a fair bit in the training. Here we're training him to be under control around the decoy because he really has no ability to control himself. So we allow him to be aroused. We give him opportunities to bite, the decoy. We take him through some drive transitions, then we put him back under control. And he goes from control to arousal, and then from control to arousal, and back and forth until the dog becomes habituated to this. So it's not so difficult for him to go from a place of really high intensity and excitement to that control and that concentration. And this is the type of training that a lot of these dogs need, especially dogs that have a little bit of a past and some bad learned behavior. You'll also notice we make a lot of oppositional pressure on him. We pull him out of the position when he's not doing the right thing, or when he's out of the position, we make pressure on him. But then when he becomes to the position, the pressure goes away. So he learns that the way to turn the pressure off is to get back to the position. It's not pressure for not being in position, if that makes sense. So, for dogs like this, I strongly recommend, I don't really follow it to the letter. I don't claim to, know everything about it, but I like using elements of the NEPOPO training system when I'm fixing dogs that have, a big arousal issues and some bad learned behavior like Vasco does. We use a lot of kind of oppositional pressure and I combine it with the e-collar to get the dog back in positions, and then teach him to hold those positions and to concentrate, to reduce the leaking and to start capping that drive and directing it into productive places. I think we covered this topic pretty adequately. I just want to say a couple things. This is not an invitation, those of you that like to inhabit my comment section with ignorance, this is not an invitation to start hating on police canine handlers. Until you've walked a mile in their shoes, I don't think you can really criticize them. Until you've handled, some high octane working canine, you're not really in position to be criticizing anybody. Nor is this an invitation to the PETA types. Oh, those poor dogs. No, these dogs are bred to do this work. The reason why they bite their handlers in many cases is because they want to do everything now. They have very poor impulse control. They want to bite the decoy. They want that ball so badly, and the handler's telling him, hey, dude, you got to slow down. And the dog doesn't, take that very well. So it's not an issue of the poor dogs don't want to do the work. The dogs are bred for the work, and they love the work. So, I just want to say, be respectful. I try to make this an educational thing so that people can hopefully learn from it.